What's that?
Looks green, just like us.
No, it's different. It doesn't have a mouth. How does it feed itself? Is it a live organism?
Strange. Let's take this back with us as a specimen.
This lesson explains how plants manufacture food through photosynthesis. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to define life processes, define autotrophic nutrition, explain the process of photosynthesis, illustrate the importance of chlorophyll through an experiment, illustrate the importance of carbon dioxide through an experiment, and illustrate the importance of sunlight through an experiment.
I wonder, do the functions of living organisms stop when they are sitting or sleeping?
Living organisms perform functions like synthesizing proteins and growing even while they don't seem to be doing anything specific. The processes that help in carrying out these metabolic functions are collectively called life processes. In order to perform these life processes, living organisms need energy. This energy is obtained from food. This entire process of obtaining energy from food is called nutrition. The nutritional processes of living organisms are decided by how complex the organisms are. Plants and a few bacteria use inorganic substances to prepare their food in the form of organic compounds. So they are called autotrophs. The process of nutrition in autotrophs is known as Autotrophic Nutrition. Fungi and animals cannot prepare their own food and directly or indirectly depend on autotrophs for their food. Such organisms are called heterotrophs, and the process of nutrition in heterotrophs is called Heterotrophic Nutrition.
So, this plant can prepare its own food?
That's right. Plants prepare food through photosynthesis. The process of using energy in sunlight to convert water and carbon dioxide into carbohydrates and oxygen is called photosynthesis. Let's look at the basic raw materials needed to perform photosynthesis. Sunlight acts as a source of energy. Carbon dioxide is obtained from the atmosphere. Water is absorbed from the soil by the roots of plants. Leaves have tiny pores on their surface called stomata. Stomata let in the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The carbon dioxide then diffuses into cell organelles called chloroplasts, which carry out photosynthesis. Let's take a closer look at these stomata. If the stomata are open all the time, the plant may lose large amounts of water through them. To prevent this, the stomata are opened only when the plant needs carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. Stomata contain guard cells that regulate the opening and closing of stomata. When water flows into them, the guard cells swell and open up the stomata. Similarly, if the guard cells shrink, the pore closes. Chloroplasts are bound by a double membrane. They contain closely packed, flattened sacs called thylakoids, arranged in piles called granum. These granum lie in a colorless ground substance called stroma. Thylakoids contain a pigment called chlorophyll, which traps solar energy.
Interesting. And how does the process of photosynthesis take place?
Photosynthesis involves a series of photochemical reactions that consists of two phases, light and dark reactions. Light reaction takes place in the thylakoids of the chloroplast. Dark reaction takes place in the stroma of the chloroplast. The energy carriers involved in photosynthesis are ATP, adenosine triphosphate, acts as an energy carrier. The third phosphate group in ATP breaks up, releasing ADP, phosphate, and energy. NADP is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate that is used as an electron carrier. NADPH is the reduced form of nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate that serves as an energy carrier. As the name suggests, light reaction takes place in the presence of sunlight. Using light energy, water molecules split up to release oxygen. The chlorophyll in the thylakoids of chloroplast traps light energy and excites an electron. This excited electron converts light energy into chemical energy, and this chemical energy is stored as ATP and NADPH. Thus, light reaction produces the energy source ATP and NADPH, but not the food. Dark reaction takes place in the stroma of the chloroplasts by reducing carbon dioxide to carbohydrates, utilizing energy from ATP. It can take place with or without the presence of sunlight. Hence the name dark reaction. By the end of dark reaction, plants prepare glucose. This glucose is used immediately by the cell or stored in the form of starch.
I really detest this light. I wish there was no sunlight on Earth.
Well, actually sunlight is essential for the process of photosynthesis. Let's try this experiment to prove it. Select 2 leaves of approximately the same size from a healthy potted plant. Cover one of the leaves with a black card as shown in the diagram. Place the potted plant in sunlight for several hours. Test both the leaves for the presence of starch using the iodine test. To conduct an iodine test, dip both the leaves in boiling water for a minute to kill the cells. Next, boil the leaves in methylated spirit over a water bath till they become pale due to the removal of chlorophyll. You will find that the surface of the leaf becomes hard and brittle. Place the leaves in a dish and pour iodine solution over them. You will find that the leaf which had been covered with the black card becomes brown. The uncovered leaf becomes blue-black, indicating the presence of starch. Since the leaf of the plant that was exposed to sunlight turned blue-black, you can conclude that light is essential for photosynthesis. Let's conduct a small experiment to prove that chlorophyll is necessary for photosynthesis to take place. Take a potted plant that has variegated leaves, such as crotons. Keep the plant in a dark room for 3 days so that all the starch gets used up. Now keep the potted plant in sunlight for 6 hours. Pluck a leaf from the plant. Mark the green areas in it and trace them using a sheet of tracing paper. Now, dip the leaf in boiling water for a few minutes. This process destroys all the enzymes in the leaf and stops any further chemical changes from taking place. After boiling, immerse the leaf in a beaker of alcohol. Place the beaker in a water bath and heat it till the alcohol begins to boil. You will see that the leaf becomes colorless as it loses its chlorophyll. Now, dip the leaf in a dilute solution of iodine for a few minutes. The green portions of the leaf turn blue-black, indicating the presence of starch. The non-green portions of the leaf turn brown, indicating that starch has not been formed. Since only the green portions of the leaf turned blue-black, you can infer that chlorophyll is essential for photosynthesis to occur. Let's carry out an experiment to prove that carbon dioxide is vital for photosynthesis. Take 2 healthy potted plants of the same size. Keep the potted plants in a dark room for 3 days. Now, place a watch glass containing potassium hydroxide beside one of the potted plants. Potassium hydroxide is used to absorb carbon dioxide. Next, cover both the plants with separate bell jars as shown. Seal the bottom of the bell jars to the glass bottom surface so that the setup is airtight. Keep the plants in sunlight for about 2 hours. Pluck a leaf from each plant and check for the presence of starch using the iodine test. The leaf which was exposed to air turns blue-black. This shows that starch was formed by the process of photosynthesis using carbon dioxide in the bell jar. The leaf from the plant that had potassium hydroxide in the bell jar does not become blue-black. This means photosynthesis did not take place. This was due to the absence of carbon dioxide in the bell jar. This proves that photosynthesis cannot take place without carbon dioxide. Water is another important raw material required for photosynthesis. Terrestrial plants take up water from the soil through their roots. Carbohydrate formation is not possible without the presence of water. Apart from water, plants also absorb nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, and magnesium from the soil. Nitrogen is taken in by plants in the form of inorganic nitrates or nitrites. Bacteria convert atmospheric nitrogen during nitrogen fixation, which are then utilized by the plants in the form of ammonia. Eat slowly. You'll get indigestion. And make sure you chew your food well before swallowing it. Chewing your food is the first step in the process of digestion. When you chew your food, complex food gets broken down into simpler form. This lesson is about nutrition in different types of organisms. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to define heterotrophic nutrition, explain heterotrophic nutrition with respect to unicellular and multicellular organisms, list the organs of digestion, describe the process of digestion in human beings, and explain how saliva prevents tooth decay. Each organism is adapted to its environment. The form of nutrition depends on the type of food as well as how it is obtained by the organism. For example, a deer gets its nutrition from grass, and the tiger in turn feeds on the deer. Animals that depend on plants or other animals for their nutrition are called heterotrophs. This type of nutrition is called heterotrophic nutrition.
Do all heterotrophic organisms take their food in the same manner?
No. Different organisms obtain and ingest their food in different ways. Fungi, like bread molds, yeast, and mushrooms, break down non-living organic material outside their bodies before absorbing it. Parasites like cuscuta, orchids, ticks, lice, leeches, and tapeworms get their food from living host plants or animals without actually killing them. Let's see how animals take in complex food and break it into simpler forms inside their bodies. Unicellular organisms like amoeba and paramecium do not have any special organs for the process of nutrition. They absorb food through their body surface. An amoeba feeds on microscopic animals that live in water. When an amoeba wants to take in a food particle, it encircles the food with its pseudopodia, and the food is enclosed in a food vacuole. The food in the food vacuole is digested by lytic enzymes. The digested food diffuses into the body of the amoeba, whereas the undigested food is thrown out. Unlike an amoeba, a paramecium is slipper-shaped with cilia on its surface. Food is taken in at a specific spot on the body. When a paramecium wants to take in food, its cilia pushes the food particle towards the entry point of the food tube. Inside the body, the food enters a food vacuole, where it is broken down into simpler form. Simple molecules are absorbed and waste material is thrown out. Multicellular organisms have specialized and complex organs for digestion, which form a digestive system. In the digestive system, food is taken in, broken down into a simpler form, and absorbed. The waste material is thrown out. This process of breaking down of complex food material into simpler form is called digestion. This digested food is absorbed by the body cells that provide fuel to live, the energy to work, and the raw material to build new cells. The digestive system is made of the alimentary canal that starts from the mouth and ends at the anus, and includes digestive glands such as the liver and pancreas. The alimentary canal is about 30 feet long in adult human beings. Mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, liver, and pancreas are organs in the digestive system. The duodenum, jejunum, and ileum make up the small intestine. The cecum, appendix, colon, and rectum make up the large intestine and anus.
I am curious. How does the digestive system work?
Food enters the body through the mouth, where it is crushed into smaller particles. When you see, smell, or taste food, salivary glands secrete saliva in the mouth. Saliva moistens the food while you eat and helps to tear it into smaller pieces. Amylase, a digestive enzyme contained in the saliva, breaks down the starch present in the food into simpler sugar. When you swallow food, it moves down into the throat or pharynx. The epiglottis, which is a flap-like structure, closes the windpipe when you swallow, so that you don't choke on your food. Food moves through a narrow tubular muscular organ called the esophagus. The lining of the food canal has muscles that contract and expand rhythmically in order to push the food forward to the stomach. This series of muscular contractions is called peristalsis. At the end of the esophagus, a muscular ring allows the food to enter the stomach and then closes. The muscular walls of the stomach help in churning and mixing the food thoroughly with the gastric juices to break it into smaller pieces. These gastric juices contain chemicals like hydrochloric acid and enzymes like pepsin, renin, and lipase. Hydrochloric acid kills any germs that may have entered along with the food. It also creates an acidic medium which activates the enzyme pepsin. Pepsin breaks down proteins into peptones and proteoses. Renin separates milk into liquid and solid portions. Lipases act on fats and help to break them down. This process continues till the food is turned into a thick liquid called chyme. The acidic food from the stomach reaches the first part of the intestine called duodenum. In the duodenum, fats are present in the form of large globules, which makes it difficult for the enzymes to act on them. These fats are broken down by the bile juice secreted by the liver. The liver is a digestive gland that produces bile and is stored in the gallbladder until it is required. Bile contains bile salts that break down the fat into smaller globules. Bile juice also makes the food alkaline for pancreatic and intestinal enzymes to act on it. The pancreas produces pancreatic juice that contains enzymes such as trypsin and lipase, which help to break down proteins and fats. The chyme now reaches the second part of the small intestine called the ileum. In the ileum, the intestinal enzymes act upon the food for further digestion. The inner walls of the small intestine have numerous finger-like projections called villi. Villi increase the surface area of the small intestine to ensure efficient and rapid absorption of nutrients. The villi are richly supplied with blood vessels which transport the absorbed food to all the cells in the body. The small intestine is the longest part of the alimentary canal. The length of the small intestine is much shorter in carnivores as compared to herbivores. This is because herbivores eat a plant-based, fibrous diet which takes longer to digest as compared to a meat-based diet. The undigested food and water then move into the large intestine. The inner lining of the colon has villi that absorb any water from solid waste. This solid material is collected in the lower part of the large intestine called the rectum. The appendix is a small, hollow, finger-like pouch which hangs at the end of the cecum. It does not have any function in the digestive system of humans. However, it is functional in herbivores such as cows. The rectum stores the solid excreta until it is ready to be excreted from the digestive system through the anus.
Since saliva contains enzymes, is it harmful for the teeth?
Saliva contains buffering agents that protect the teeth from decay. When we eat something sugary, bacteria produce an acid that attacks the enamel in the teeth. This removes minerals like calcium and phosphate from the teeth and makes them susceptible to decay, thereby forming plaque. Saliva contains minerals that are used to repair tooth decay. At the same time, the buffering agents in saliva neutralize the acids and prevent further decay.
Phew! I am out of breath. Let me get some air.
Air is vital for us as it contains oxygen. Oxygen is used to break down the food we eat into energy. This energy, in turn, is used by us for various activities like running, walking, swimming, and cycling. This lesson is about the process of respiration. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to define respiration, differentiate between aerobic and anaerobic respiration, explain how glucose is broken down, define ATP, define diffusion, explain the process of respiration in plants, explain how the respiration process in aquatic animals is adapted to their environment, and explain the process of respiration in human beings.
I don't understand. We breathe in oxygen but breathe out carbon dioxide?
We breathe or inhale oxygen, which then diffuses into the tissues and breaks down glucose and produces energy. This results in the formation of carbon dioxide and water. The carbon dioxide gets eliminated from the body, but the oxygen remains behind. This process of inhaling oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide is called breathing, and the metabolic process for producing energy is known as respiration. Carbon dioxide is present in atmospheric air. However, when we exhale, we breathe out a greater amount of carbon dioxide than the amount that is present in the atmospheric air. Exhaled air is composed of 5.6% carbon dioxide, whereas inhaled air contains 0.03% carbon dioxide. Let's try to prove this through an experiment. Take 2 test tubes containing freshly prepared lime water. Blow air through the lime water in the first test tube. Use a syringe to pass air through the lime water in the second test tube. You will observe that in the first test tube, the lime water turns milky immediately. You will find that it takes longer for the lime water to turn milky in the second test tube as compared to the first test tube. This proves that air contains less carbon dioxide than the amount that we breathe out. Even microorganisms release carbon dioxide. Let's try out an activity to demonstrate this. Take some fruit juice in a flask and add some yeast to it. Fit the flask with a 1-holed cork. Fit the cork with a bent glass tube. Dip the free end of the glass tube into a test tube containing lime water. You will find that the lime water turns milky. From this activity, you can conclude that microorganisms release carbon dioxide. Yeast acted on the sugar present in the fruit juice and released carbon dioxide. This process is called fermentation. Glucose can be broken down both in the presence or in the absence of oxygen. All higher animals need oxygen to break down glucose, while some microbes break down glucose in the absence of oxygen. Food in the form of glucose breaks down into carbon dioxide and water. Since this process takes place in the presence of oxygen, it is known as aerobic respiration. Organisms that break down their food in this manner are called aerobic organisms. There are a few microbes that break down glucose into alcohol and carbon dioxide. This process takes place without oxygen, and is hence known as anaerobic respiration. Such organisms are called anaerobic organisms. In both aerobic and anaerobic organisms, when respiration takes place, a glucose molecule that contains 6 carbon atoms is broken down into a molecule that contains 3 carbon atoms. This new molecule is called a pyruvate. This entire process takes place in the cytoplasm of the organism. In aerobic organisms, the pyruvate molecule is further broken down in the mitochondria of a cell. In this process, the pyruvate molecule that contains 3 carbon atoms is broken down into 3 molecules of carbon dioxide and 3 molecules of water. Sometimes our muscle cells may not have enough oxygen. In this case, the pyruvate molecules are broken down in the anaerobic process. Pyruvate molecules get converted into lactic acid, which is also a 3-carbon molecule. This lactic acid builds up in our muscle cells and causes cramps. Both aerobic and anaerobic respiration releases energy. This energy is used to combine adenosine diphosphate, ADP, and inorganic phosphate to form adenosine triphosphate, ATP molecule. ATP is the molecular currency for the transfer of energy in most cellular processes. The energy released in the aerobic process is 19 times greater than in the anaerobic process. When the terminal phosphate linkage in ATP is broken using water, energy equivalent to 30.5 kilojoules per mole is released. The energy from ATP is used for cellular activities such as the contraction of muscles, protein synthesis, and conduction of nervous impulses. Stomata are small openings seen on the lower surface of the leaves. The leaves have large intercellular spaces in between the mesophyll cells. This ensures that all the cells are in contact with air. Carbon dioxide and oxygen are therefore exchanged through the stomata by diffusion. Diffusion is the process by which a gas from an area of high concentration will move to an area of relatively low concentration until an equilibrium is reached. During the day, carbon dioxide generated during respiration is used up for photosynthesis. Therefore, carbon dioxide is not released. Instead, oxygen is released as a result of photosynthesis. At night, photosynthesis does not occur, but respiration continues. Therefore, only carbon dioxide is released. Animals have different organs for respiration depending on their environment. Animals that live on land take in oxygen from the atmosphere. Aquatic animals, on the other hand, use oxygen that is dissolved in water.
I wonder why goldfish open and close their mouths so many times.
Fish take in water through their mouths. This water has dissolved oxygen in it, which diffuses into their blood. The water is then forced out through their gills. the amount of dissolved oxygen in water is much lower when compared to the amount of oxygen in air. So, the rate of breathing in aquatic organisms is much faster than in terrestrial organisms. This is why a fish opens and closes its mouth a far greater number of times as compared to the number of times you breathe in and out. Terrestrial animals have special organs for taking in oxygen from the atmosphere. All these organs have a structure that is in contact with the atmosphere. This structure increases the surface area for diffusion of air into the organs. The surface of this structure is very fine and delicate in order to allow diffusion of gases like carbon dioxide and oxygen. Since this surface is delicate, it is placed within the body. There are passages in the body that transport the air to this surface, allowing diffusion to take place.
I have a cold. I can't seem to breathe properly.
In human beings, air is drawn into the body through the nostrils. Nostrils are lined with fine hairs and mucus that filter the air as it passes through. Next, the air travels through the throat and then moves through the rings of cartilage called the trachea. The trachea ensures that the air passage does not collapse. From here, the air passes through the bronchi before entering the lungs. The bronchi are like a network of tubes that keep branching into smaller tubes. At the end of each bronchus, you will find balloon-like structures called alveoli. The alveoli provide a surface for the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. The walls of the alveoli contain a massive network of blood vessels. When we breathe in, we lift our ribs and flatten our diaphragm. As a result, the chest cavity becomes larger. Air gets sucked into the lungs and fills the expanded alveoli. The oxygen in the alveoli is taken in by the red blood cells in the alveolar blood vessels. The oxygen in the red blood cells is then transported to all the cells in the body. The cells in turn release carbon dioxide, which diffuses into the blood and is then released into the alveoli. It is difficult for oxygen to reach all parts of the body through diffusion in larger animals. Hemoglobin, a pigment present in red blood cells, binds with oxygen from the air in the lungs, forming oxyhemoglobin. Later, through oxyhemoglobin, oxygen is distributed to tissues all over the body. The tissues in turn release carbon dioxide, which diffuses into the nearby blood capillaries. Carbon dioxide is more soluble in water than in oxygen. Therefore, carbon dioxide is generally transported through blood as bicarbonate, which is its dissolved form.
The train is an hour late. Now I won't reach in time for my meeting.
Trains are used to transport both humans and freight. However, we often come across instances when trains don't reach their destinations on time. Animals have an inbuilt transportation system for carrying oxygen, nutrients, and waste products. This system is referred to as the circulatory system and consists of the heart and a network of blood vessels. Unlike a train, the circulatory system cannot afford to delay the transport of any substance within a body. This lesson explains how various substances like blood and lymph are transported through the bodies of animals. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to describe the composition of blood. Describe how blood vessels transport blood through the body. Describe the composition of lymph. Compare the structure of heart in different animals. Explain the process of circulation of blood in the heart. And define blood pressure.
In Venice, a boat is the most important mode of transport.
Venice is a city of canals where people use boats to travel from one point to another. In the circulatory system, blood is the most important mode of transport. Blood is a fluid connective tissue that consists of a fluid medium called plasma, in which red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets are suspended. Plasma transports food, carbon dioxide, and nitrogenous wastes in dissolved form throughout the body. Oxygen is delivered to the tissues by a pigment called hemoglobin that is present in red blood cells. The unit of measurement for hemoglobin is gram per deciliter of whole blood. In newborn babies, 17 to 22 gram per deciliter of hemoglobin is present. For children, the normal range is in between 11 and 13 gram per deciliter, and for adults, it is between 12 and 18 gram per deciliter. An adult male has a hemoglobin level between 14 and 18 gram per deciliter, and in adult women it is between 12 and 16 gram per deciliter. The normal range of hemoglobin is not the same for all animals. In cattle, for example, the range of hemoglobin is between 8 and 19%, which is quite different from that of human beings.
The city of Venice has an extensive network of waterways that allow boats to move around freely.
Similarly, blood is transported from one part of the body to another through an intricate network of tubes called blood vessels. Blood needs to be pumped through the blood vessels for it to reach each and every tissue in the body. This function of pumping is carried out by the heart. Blood vessels are comprised of arteries and veins. Arteries are the blood vessels which carry oxygenated blood away from the heart to various organs in the body. When the blood flows out from the heart, it is at high pressure. To withstand this pressure while transporting the blood, the walls of the arteries are thick and elastic. On reaching an organ or tissue, the artery divides into smaller vessels so that the blood can reach each individual cell. The smallest vessels have walls which are 1 cell thick and are called capillaries. The thin walls of the capillaries allow oxygen and nutrients to pass from the blood into the tissues and waste products from the tissues into the blood. The capillaries then join to form veins that carry the blood away from the organ or tissue. veins collect blood from different organs and transport it back to the heart. As compared to arteries, veins have thinner and less muscular walls. This is because the pressure of the blood that they carry is much lower than that carried by arteries. Due to the same reason, veins have valves that allow the blood to flow only in one direction. This ensures that the flow of deoxygenated blood is one way, only towards the heart. If a blood vessel ruptures or gets cut, blood leaks out and results in bleeding. This makes blood flow out of the body. Alternately, the blood may flow out through a break in the blood vessel and stay within the tissue spaces. Both these cases could prove to be fatal. In addition, bleeding results in low pressure in the blood vessels, which affects the working of the heart. Platelet cells in the blood act as a defense against bleeding. When a blood vessel ruptures, platelets form a blood clot at the point of injury and help to plug the leak. The circulatory system also uses lymph or tissue fluid to transport substances through the body. Blood supplies nutrients to the tissues and collects the waste products which do not get absorbed by the tissues. The waste product and any excess fluid diffuse into the intercellular spaces of the tissues and then form the tissue fluid or lymph. Lymph is similar to the plasma in blood, but it is colorless and contains less protein. Once lymph is formed in the intercellular spaces, it drains into lymphatic capillaries. Lymphatic capillaries join to form larger lymph vessels that finally open into larger veins. The veins ultimately carry the lymph back into the blood.
These white lines on the road are called dividers. They are used to separate incoming traffic from outgoing traffic.
Similarly, the heart has specific chambers that prevent oxygenated blood from mixing with deoxygenated blood. The heart is a muscular organ which is about the size of our fist. The structure of the heart is not the same in all animals. Fishes have two-chambered hearts that have one ventricle and one atrium. The deoxygenated blood from the ventricle is pumped into the gills, where the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place. The oxygenated blood then passes to the rest of the body and eventually returns to the atrium. Thus, blood circulates through the heart only once in the cycle. Therefore, this type of circulation is known as single circulation. Fishes are able to extract 80% of the oxygen contained in water passing over their gills. Human beings, on the other hand, can extract only about 25% of oxygen from inhaled air. Amphibians and reptiles have three-chambered hearts with two atria and one ventricle. Blood from the right atrium flows to the lungs, where the exchange of gases occurs. Blood then returns to the left atrium. This oxygenated blood and some deoxygenated blood flows from the atria into the ventricle and passes through to the rest of the body. Eventually, the blood returns to the right atrium of the heart. The disadvantage of a three-chambered heart is that oxygenated blood mixes with deoxygenated blood as there is no mechanism to keep them separated. Although fish have a two-chambered heart, most of the oxygen required by the body is extracted by the gills. All birds and mammals have four-chambered hearts that contain two atria and two ventricles. The atria and ventricles are completely separated so that oxygenated blood does not mix with deoxygenated blood. Since oxygenated blood is segregated, it allows an efficient supply of oxygen to the body. This is useful in warm-blooded animals like birds and mammals who constantly use energy to maintain their body temperature. Blood flows through the heart twice during each cycle in vertebrates like amphibians, reptiles, birds and mammals. So this type of circulation is known as double circulation. The heart is supplied with valves, which allow blood to flow in only one direction from the auricle to the ventricle. These valves prevent the blood from flowing back. Let's take a look at how the heart works in detail. Deoxygenated blood flows from the body to the right atrium of the heart, which expands to collect blood. The right atrium then contracts, and at the same time, the right ventricle dilates. This transfers blood to the right ventricle. The right ventricle in turn contracts and pumps the blood to the lungs for oxygenation. Since ventricles have to pump blood into various organs, their walls are thicker and more muscular than those of the atria. Valves present in the ventricles and atria ensure that blood does not flow backwards during contraction or expansion. Blood is oxygenated in the lungs and is carried back into the left atrium of the heart. The left atrium relaxes when it is collecting the blood from the lungs. It then contracts while the left ventricle expands so that the blood is transferred to it. Now the muscular left ventricle contracts in order to pump blood to all parts of the body. Deoxygenated blood from different parts of the body flows into the right atrium of the heart once again. This is how the heart helps in the circulation of blood. The body of a truck is equipped so that it can handle the stress exerted by heavy loads. Similarly, blood vessels are equipped to handle the pressure exerted by blood against their walls. This force applied by blood is called blood pressure. This pressure is much greater in arteries than in veins. The pressure exerted by blood against the wall of the artery during ventricular contraction or systole is called systolic pressure, and during ventricular expansion or diastole is called diastolic pressure. The normal systolic pressure is about 120 millimeters of Hg and diastolic pressure is 80 millimeters of Hg. An instrument called a sphygmomanometer is used to measure blood pressure. High blood pressure is also called hypertension. It is caused by the constriction of capillaries of arteries called arterioles. This results in increased resistance to blood flow. High blood pressure can lead to ruptured arteries and internal bleeding. It is 9 in the morning and the school bus is picking up children from the neighborhood. Children avail this type of transport every day. In the evening again, the bus drops the children at their homes. The bus is the school's lifeline and the preferred transport of all children. In the same way, plants also have specific tissues which act as lifelines. These tissues transport nutrients to different parts of the plant. This lesson is about the transportation of water and nutrients to different parts of the plant body. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to describe the process of transportation in plants. Describe the vascular tissue in plants. Explain how water and minerals are transported through the xylem. And explain how food is transported through the phloem.
Hi, I'm Cabby, and this is my solar-powered taxi. I am out to create a record for the longest drive made on solar power. Why don't you join me? I didn't tell you how I got this novel idea. I was inspired by plants.
Plants use energy from sunlight to fix atmospheric carbon dioxide into carbohydrates. Water and chlorophyll is required as raw material and oxygen is released as the byproduct. Plants also need raw materials that come from the soil. Soil has the richest source of raw materials like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and other minerals. The absorption of these substances occurs through the roots.
Let me give you some tips about cars. The energy needs of cars differ with its design.
In fact, this holds true for plants as well. Plants have low energy needs as they do not move. Therefore, plant bodies have a large proportion of dead cells. As a result, plants can survive with slow transport systems. If the distance between the roots and the leaves are small, nutrients can easily diffuse in the plant body from the region of higher concentration to the region of lower concentration. However, if these distances become large because of the plant body design, diffusion alone cannot provide raw materials and energy reserves to the plant. A proper system of transportation is therefore essential in such types of plants.
There's a fix to every problem.
Tall plants have transport systems called vascular tissues, which move raw materials from the roots and food from leaves. This happens through 2 sets of conducting tubes that work independently. The xylem moves water and minerals from the soil to the plant. The phloem transports food from the leaves to different parts of the plant. Xylem tissue is present in the roots, stems and leaves. It has 4 different types of cells: tracheids, vessels, xylem fibers, and xylem parenchyma. Of these, only tracheids and vessels are interconnected to form a continuous system of water-conducting channels that reach all parts of the plant.
As you can see, I take good care of my cab. Everyone needs nourishment.
Plants get their nourishment from soil. In the roots, the cells in contact with the soil take up ions. This creates a high concentration of ions in the roots than in the soil. Therefore, water moves into the roots from the soil to eliminate this ionic difference. This process is known as osmosis. This ensures a steady movement of water into the roots, creating a water column that is pushed upwards. However, this pressure is not enough to move this water to the higher parts of a tall tree. Plants use the process of transpiration to move water in the xylem up to the highest parts of the plant body. Let's see how. Evaporation of water in plants takes place from the spongy mesophyll cells to the intercellular spaces present in the leaves and finally through the stomata to the atmosphere. This creates a suction which pulls water from the xylem cells of roots to higher parts. This loss of water in the form of vapor from the leaves and stem is known as transpiration.
It seems we've come a long way from home. Let me tell you something about my cab. She needs to be cooled every now and then to perform her best.
Transpiration helps to cool the plants and to get rid of excess water. During the day, when the stomata are open, the transpiration pool becomes the driving force in the movement of water in the xylem. Transportation of water in small herbaceous plants is influenced by root pressure. It usually occurs during the night when soil moisture is very high. Water is lost in the form of water droplets, which we often see as dew on leaves. Let's see what root pressure is. The osmotic pressure within the cells of a root system causes the water to move from higher concentration soil to lower concentration root cell. This pressure allows water to move from the roots into the leaves. The excess water exudates out as drops of xylem sap from the edges of leaves. This process is known as guttation. Wondering what happens to the carbon dioxide, water, and minerals once they reach the leaves? They are used during photosynthesis to prepare glucose. This glucose is transported from the leaves to the storage organs of roots, fruits, and seeds, and to the rapidly growing regions of the plant. Thus, the food not only moves downward, but also in upward direction. Transportation of soluble substances like sugars, amino acids, and hormones by phloem tissue is called translocation. Sugar is translocated in the form of sucrose. Phloem is made of 4 types of cells: sieve tubes, companion cells, phloem fibers, and phloem parenchyma. Translocation takes place in the sieve tubes with the help of adjacent companion cells. Simple physical forces bring about transportation in xylem, while translocation in phloem happens by using energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate, ATP. Here's a detailed look at the process of translocation of glucose from the leaves to the roots. Water molecules move up the plant body by transpiration. Some water molecules move into leaf cells by osmosis. Glucose molecules in the leaves are transferred to phloem tissue using energy from ATP. This process is called active transport. This high concentration of sugar in the phloem causes water to move from adjacent cells to the phloem by osmosis. It creates an osmotic pressure in the leaves, which eventually results in translocation of solutes from its region of higher concentration to the region of low concentration, like root or other storage organs. Finally, sugar molecules move to the root system.
Looks like I've come to the end of the road. Thanks for giving me company. See you soon.
All cities have a garbage disposal system in place to maintain clean and hygienic living conditions. Similarly, all living organisms use some kind of a mechanism to eject wastes from their bodies. In this lesson, we will take a closer look at the waste disposal strategies used by various organisms. This lesson is about the process of excretion in different types of organisms. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to describe the importance of the excretion process, describe the structure of the excretory system in human beings, describe how the excretory system in a human works, list important functions of the kidneys, describe the process of dialysis, and describe how the process of excretion takes place in plants. All living organisms consume food to obtain nutrients and energy. The food is broken down into simpler molecules by the process of metabolism. These metabolic reactions create nitrogenous materials that are not required for the cells of the body and may even harm the body if they are not removed quickly. The process involved in the removal of these harmful metabolic wastes from the body is called excretion. Different organisms use different strategies for the process of excretion. Unicellular organisms, such as amoeba, remove wastes by simple diffusion from the body surface into the surrounding water. Multicellular organisms, such as flatworms, use specialized organs to perform the same function. Higher plants eliminate gases and excess water through the stomata on the surface of leaves. Human beings have a specialized excretory system for the removal of metabolic wastes. In addition to excretion, it also maintains salt, water, and body fluid balance. This regulatory mechanism is called homeostasis. The excretory system in human beings includes a pair of kidneys, a pair of ureters, a urinary bladder, and a urethra. This is referred to as the urinary system. Now, let's find out the location of the kidneys. The kidneys are located in the abdomen, one on either side of the backbone. The kidneys perform several crucial functions. For example, they excrete water, salts, and urea in the form of urine. They control the amount of water in the blood. The kidneys maintain the level of body fluids in the blood by regulating the salt concentration. If this did not happen, then the osmosis or movement of water between body cells and blood would be hampered. Kidneys maintain the blood pH at 7.4. Each kidney is divided into two distinct regions, an inner medulla and an outer cortex. The cortex forms a shell around the medulla. The medulla is composed of conical masses of tissue that leads to the pelvis. The cortex has a random arrangement of tiny tubules called nephrons, which are the functional units of the kidney. Each kidney contains about 1 million nephrons. Each nephron consists of a corpuscle and a renal tubule. A corpuscle is composed of tangled clusters of tiny blood capillaries called glomerulus. This is called the filtration unit. A thin-walled, sac-like structure called Bowman's capsule surrounds the glomerulus. The inner layer of Bowman's capsule covers the glomerulus, and the outer layer is continuous with the inner layer and with the wall of the renal tubule. The renal tubule leads the way from the Bowman's capsule and becomes highly coiled to form the proximal convoluted tubule. The tubule makes a hairpin loop called the loop of Henle and joins the distal convoluted tubule. The distal convoluted tubule opens into a collecting duct which passes into the renal medulla. Two ureters carry urine from the renal medulla to the bladder. Each ureter is about 10 to 12 inches long. The bladder is muscular and bulges when urine enters it and contracts when urine passes through. Two sphincter muscles are located where the bladder and the urethra meet to prevent the reverse flow of urine into the ureters. The urethra carries urine to the outside of the body. The urethra emerges through the penis in males and close to the vagina in females. Thus, the excretory path in kidneys begins in the corpuscles and moves through the proximal convoluted tubule, loop of Henle, distal convoluted tubule, collecting duct, ureter, urinary bladder, urethra, and finally ends at the penis or vagina. Waste products in the body are transported by the blood to the kidneys through the renal arteries. Unwanted wastes and toxic products such as urea, uric acid, hydrogen and potassium ions are left behind in the kidneys. These excretory products are removed by nephrons in the form of liquid called urine. The kidney performs 3 functions leading to urine formation: ultrafiltration, selective reabsorption, and tubular secretion. Nephrons filter minerals, wastes and water but retain red cells, proteins and large molecules. This process is known as ultrafiltration. The filtered blood is returned to the body through the veins. Some substances in the initial filtrate, such as glucose, amino acids, salts, and a major amount of water, are selectively reabsorbed as the urine flows along the tube. Further absorption of nitrogen compounds takes place through the hairpin loop and the distal convoluted tubule. Further substances not required by the body may be secreted into the filtrate by cells of the nephron before it leaves the kidney. Next, the urine is poured into the collecting duct. Then the urine flows from the medulla into the pelvis of each kidney. Finally, through the ureter, urine is drained into the bladder. The bladder is muscular, so it can expand to store the urine until it is disposed of. The muscles in the bladder make it open up automatically in babies when the bladder is half full. Adults can control these muscles. An adult bladder can hold about 800 milliliters of urine. In a normal healthy adult, the initial filtrate in the kidneys is about 180 liters per day. However, the volume actually excreted is only a liter or 2 a day because the remaining filtrate is reabsorbed into the kidney tubules. When factors like infections, injury, or restricted blood flow affect the functions of kidneys, it leads to the accumulation of poisonous wastes in the body. If not detected on time, these accumulated wastes can lead to death. For people with an injured kidney, an external artificial kidney can be used to remove nitrogenous waste products from the blood. The process of externally purifying the blood is called dialysis. An artificial kidney contains a number of tubes with a semi-permeable lining suspended in a tank filled with dialyzing fluid. This fluid has the same osmotic pressure as blood, except that it is devoid of nitrogenous wastes. The patient's blood is passed through these tubes. During this passage, the waste products from the blood pass into the dialyzing fluid through diffusion. The purified blood is pumped back into the patient. The actions performed here are similar to the functions of a kidney, except that there is no reabsorption. Compared to animals, plants use completely different strategies for excreting waste material. These techniques differ from plant to plant. During photosynthesis, plants release oxygen as a waste product, and during respiration, they release carbon dioxide. Plants get rid of excess water through transpiration. Many plant waste products are stored in the vacuoles of cells. Waste products may be stored in leaves that fall off. They may also be stored as resins and gum, especially in old xylem. Other wastes include dead plant tissues like cork. Plants also excrete some waste substances into the soil around them.